It is my pleasure to be able to introduce Bryson Worley. And Bryson is such a dear friend. He has been a general educator, a special educator. He's worked in rural systems and urban systems. He's been working at this for 15 years now, and I've known him since probably 2006, 2007. And when I first met Bryson, he was a special educator. And he first started with us at the very beginning. But what I know, now he's an assistant principal at Gainesville High School, a very culturally diverse high school in northeast Georgia, just northeast of Atlanta, if you don't know where Gainesville is. And it is it has its challenges, but somehow they've turned those all into successes. What I know most about Bryson is that he is a student advocate. He's the kind of man that is going to be in a professional meeting and he hears there's someone not in school and they're close to graduating. He's going to leave that meeting, go find that child, and get him back into school. He is such an advocate for students, and I think it'll really come through when you hear him tell his story of what's been happening at Gainesville High School. It is my pleasure to introduce Bryson Worley.
I don't know how I live up to that. Everything I do is because I have a great team at Gainesville High School. Two of them are sitting in this room, and I feel almost embarrassed to be talking about what we do and not have them stand up and do the same thing. It's interesting, graduate first. First we heard about it at Gainesville High School, I was, like she said, I was the old RVI coordinator. I know we have some in the room. It's now called CTI. And we were along with Rabun County with Mark Ernest. I'm sure you've heard about Mark and Rabun County and what all they do. We were a pilot school with them, and it's so important, standing on this side of it, is the importance of the administration and buy-in. At the time, we had a different principal, a different superintendent, and for whatever reason, for a lot of reasons, it kind of fell apart. And see Dr. Smith shaking her head. It's so important to have that buy-in at the administrative level. It's funny now, last summer, my principal went to a conference or was talking with Laura, someone, about getting back involved, or our superintendent, and it was, we got to get back in this. It was so funny to see the material. I didn't really know what they were talking about, and then they started handing me the material, and I saw names that I knew, and I said, whoa, 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 I think this is the same thing that we screwed up the first time. And it was, but it's different now with a different feeling and buy-in. It's a totally different situation, and I want to thank the people involved for getting us back in. Like I said, I'm at Gainesville High School. A little bit about us. This is what we do. It may or may not work for what you do at your school or for the people you teach. But this is what works for us. These numbers represent a little bit about the Gainesville High School family. We have 1,560 kids. Actually, I got an email setting up there just now that we're up to about 1,580 today, well, as of the last count. 78 represents, we are 78 free and reduced lunch, and that's the ones we can get to turn it back in. So we're 45% Hispanic or Latino. We are 27% Caucasian, 26% African American, and 2% Asian or other. Kind of just combine those two for sake of room. Very diverse, and like Dr. Boss and I were talking about earlier, inside that diversity, we're even more diverse socioeconomically. We have kids that are worth millions of dollars. We have kids that can't buy, they wouldn't eat if we didn't have free and reduced lunch. Very diverse population in a bunch of different ways. And hopefully you'll see, I'm not going to tell you what our graduation rate is until a little later, because I don't think that's what's important. I think what's important is that you see what I was asked to do is talk about what have we done to get to where we are. Anybody ever seen that? Right? This was me. This is actually my comment. These are not comments from kids. No, this would have been my comment in high school. But we all see these. She's tripping, right? Math, that's a curriculum issue. I'm not going to stay here. I'm just going to go work. I had a kid one time in a previous school tell me, Coach Worley, I'd drop out right now, go to this job, and have a trailer just as nice as my mama. I'm not doing this homework. What do you do with that? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into that, but that's the kind of things we all hear with our kids. As an administrator, I hear she's tripping or you're tripping more than anything else. Go ahead and write me up. That's a kid that's given up on you already, okay, if they gotten to that point, if they were at that point. And recently, I'm starting to hear this one with our English second language learners getting started on their core classes a little late. At our school, they're starting to disengage because I don't want to be 20 when I get out of here. You know, I don't want to, and so I don't want to be too old. I'm just going to go ahead and quit. I don't want to be too old. What was our process? Something that's on the website, the data probe. If you've got to start somewhere, start there. It's not always fun to see what you see, but it's where you start. And then very simply, there's a whole process that you can get off the website, but to be simple today, because I'm not really sure who all is in the audience and how familiar you are with the whole process, you want to ask who's at risk for dropping out. I'll go ahead and, why are they at risk for dropping out? You know, what can you do differently? When should you do that? That's important, we found out. Should you do it freshman year, senior year? Is there something else somewhere? And then how are we going to do that? How much money is it going to take? How much time is it going to take? How much resources? You know, if you've been in education, as I'm sure everybody in this room has been in it for a while, or at least familiar, you know there's two things you always need, more time and more money, right? Besides that, I mean, everything else is pretty easy, right? Daryl White, our freshman academy principal, coined these two. This is one way we kind of group our kids in the freshman academy. We have a freshman academy at Gainesville High School, or we used to have a really separate academy, but because of budget constraints, it's a little bit grouped together now. But he came up with ICU and CCU, and very quickly, all that is it's our little terms. We have a lot of them. I know the people that work with me, we have a lot of little sayings we do or say, but ICU are kids that are might have passed the graduate or the CRCT coming in from the 8th grade, but have very low numbers, right over 800 or whatever, whatever they kind of decide. And then CCU are kids that have failed and retaken and passed, or have moved up and never passed, promoted, however that goes. These are kids we target. And they can have disabilities. They can have, they could be second language learners. They could be, non-labeled. And you'll see what I mean by non-labeled. We have encore kids, which are our freshmen repeaters. Okay? And this is kind of an interior naming system that we use. When we say encore, we know what we're talking about. With encore kids, for instance, not this past year, but the year before, just some data. And this is where the data, and looking deeper, we found something that was very alarming to us. We had 165 freshman repeaters out of about 500 and something, I think. I can't remember. We have some stringent promotion requirements that I'll talk about a little bit later, but what you need to know right now is something we found out was about 54% of those kids were non-labeled kids. They were not in special education or not ELL kids, right? So our special education kids, and you'll see in a minute, are usually pretty successful at Gainesville High School for whatever reason, traditionally, and they're getting support. Our second language learners have support. We had a bunch of kids that were in our school, freshmen, encore, had failed a freshman year that were not getting any support outside of normal teacher interaction, counselor interaction. And so we put some things in place to help those students. And then we call it the list. This is the list, and you all have one. And especially if you're an administrator, you know what list I'm talking about. It's the list of kids in that cohort that's supposed to graduate this year, right? That's our list. That's what we call the list. Our graduation coach, who couldn't be here today, and our previous graduation coach, that's one of their big jobs, is to find those kids on the list. And you'll see kind of what we do with that a little later on. Where did we start? Again, data probes. That made us look even deeper into what we were doing. I know it doesn't sound really fun, but you will be amazed that when you really start digging what you find. And sometimes it's kind of scary. We categorize, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we started talking about learning barriers. Our district's also part of a collaborative with UCLA. It's called the LEAD Collaborative. And some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. It stems from Hurricane Katrina. And for one instance, it's like the Mobile City Schools. They had all these kids that influx in, moved in, had all these problems where they found out there were 6 content arenas that they had to help fix. But anyway, make a long story short, we've been working with them, and they said, what are your learning barriers? Ask your kids, ask your teachers, ask your parents, but ask your kids and your teachers, what are barriers to learning in your school? And you're going to come up with a big list. Just some of the things we came up with. Pregnancy, this is just a small list. We have what we call a war room at our school. It's got dry erase boards all the way around, and we started writing on that board all the things that keep kids from graduating, from passing classes, from being successful, and these are just a little bit. We have immigration issues at school, right? Some of you, I'm sure, have those, but that's kind of just a small sample of what we came up to.